You are walking down a crowded modern street and suddenly pass someone with a heavy brow ridge and an unusually barrel-chested frame. They are not a mutant, and they are definitely not wearing a costume. For hundreds of thousands of years, this scenario was not science fiction. You used to share this exact planet with another highly intelligent human species, the Neanderthals. They were your closest evolutionary cousins, living right alongside you. But today, you are the only human species left.
Where did you go?
Imagine for a moment what your world would look like if they had never gone extinct. What if you had to share your office, your subway car, and your local grocery store with a species naturally built to hunt massive mammoths? To answer that, we first need to shatter everything you thought you knew about them. Forget the dumb, grunting caveman stereotype you learned in school. The real Neanderthals, confirmed by modern archaeology, were incredibly sophisticated survivors. They successfully roamed the freezing landscapes of Eurasia for over 300,000 years. That is a run far longer than our own species, Homo sapiens, has even existed. So why do you assume you are so much smarter? Let's place you face to face with an average Neanderthal right now. The first thing you would immediately notice is their sheer, intimidating physical power. They were likely shorter than you, but their bones were incredibly thick and dense. A casual Neanderthal handshake might accidentally crush your delicate modern fingers. Their massive, barrel-shaped rib cages housed gigantic lungs, perfectly evolved for pulling in cold, thin air during their exhausting hunts in the Ice Age tundra. If you put a Neanderthal in a modern gym, they would absolutely humiliate your strongest bodybuilders without even trying. They were built for pure survival. But this extreme muscle mass came with a brutal biological tax. To fuel that powerful body, they required massive amounts of energy every single day. While you might survive comfortably on about 2,000 calories a day, a hunting Neanderthal easily burned through 4,000 to 5,000 calories. This means if a Neanderthal lived in your house today, your monthly grocery bill would completely bankrupt you. But food wasn't their only unique trait. To get those 5,000 calories, they couldn't just order takeout. They had to hunt the most dangerous animals to ever walk the earth. Welcome to the Ice Age. The landscape was frozen, unforgiving, and crawling with massive beasts like woolly mammoths and giant cave bears. You might imagine them safely throwing spears from a safe distance. But archaeological evidence shows a much more terrifying reality for them. They didn't have bows and arrows. To kill a mammoth, a Neanderthal had to run right up to it and thrust a heavy wooden spear. This was extreme close-quarters combat. Imagine wrestling a furious multi-ton animal equipped with deadly tusks, armed with nothing but a sharpened stick. The physical toll was unimaginable. Anthropologists like Eric Trinkaus studied their skeletons and discovered a shocking pattern of severe, healed bone fractures. Their injury patterns didn't match typical ancient humans. Instead, their broken bones perfectly mirrored the injuries seen in modern professional rodeo riders. Yes, hunting for a Neanderthal was basically like getting thrown off a violently angry bull every single time they needed to eat. But here is the most incredible part. They didn't just die from these brutal injuries. Their dense bones healed, and they kept hunting. However, brute strength and extreme pain tolerance were not enough to conquer the Ice Age. The freezing nights were the real killer. The cold doesn't just hurt, it waits for you to fall asleep. To survive the lethal winters, they had to master fire. They didn't just sit around waiting for lightning to strike a tree. Evidence shows they actively manufactured their own fire using specific stones. They struck pyrite against flint to create sparks. They even used fire to heat birch bark, creating a sticky prehistoric superglue for their tools. This level of chemical engineering totally destroys the myth of the mindless brute. They were highly skilled survivors, adapting to a frozen hell. But what happened when they retreated back into the warmth of their caves? The evidence found in the dark will completely shock you. As your eyes adjust to the dim light of the cave, you don't find a group of mindless apes grunting in the cold dirt. You find tightly knit families, and perhaps the most shocking discovery of all, overwhelming archaeological evidence of deep human empathy and compassion. In Shanidar Cave in modern-day Iraq, archaeologists unearthed the skeletal remains of an older Neanderthal man who fundamentally changed how we view their entire species. Known as Shanidar I, this man had suffered massive trauma. He was partially blind, his right arm was withered, and he had severe leg injuries. In the brutal Ice Age, a hunter with these extreme disabilities should have died immediately. Yet his bones showed that he lived for many years. He survived because his tribe did not abandon him. They actively protected him, chewed his food for him, and nursed him through the freezing winters. This level of medical care and social support is profoundly human. But their emotional depth did not just stop at caring for the living. When a Neanderthal died, they didn't just leave the body to scavengers. They intentionally dug graves and carefully buried their dead out of respect. Some researchers even debate if they placed flowers in the graves. Regardless, burying the dead requires a complex understanding of mortality and perhaps spirituality. And if you look closely at the illuminated cave walls, you might see something else. Neanderthals were likely the world's very first painters. In caves across Spain, archaeologists found red ochre hand stencils dating back over 64,000 years, long before our own ancestors arrived. They wore eagle claws as jewelry and used crushed minerals for body paint. They possessed symbolic thought, creativity, and a true sense of identity. So if you were sitting in that cave with them today, you wouldn't be looking at inferior animals. You would be looking at equals. They had families, they had complex art, they controlled fire, and they had extreme physical strength. They were perfectly adapted to rule the planet. This brings us to a terrifying evolutionary paradox. If they were so incredibly advanced and powerful, why are you here while they are gone? You have always been taught that humans survived because we had the biggest, smartest brains. But this is actually a massive biological lie. If you measured a Neanderthal skull, their brain capacity was around 1,500 cubic centimeters. Your modern brain is only about 1,400. They literally had more gray matter than you do right now. So how did our physically weaker ancestors win the ultimate survival game? The answer lies in how that brain power was divided. A large portion of their brain was dedicated purely to vision and body control. Because they had massive muscles and hunted in the dark, European Ice Age environments, their visual cortex took up a huge amount of space. Your ancestors, coming from the bright African savannas, didn't need as much visual processing. Instead, they evolved something completely different and far more dangerous. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed the famous social brain hypothesis. He discovered that our ancestors used their extra brain space for a secret weapon. That weapon was complex social networking, or simply put, gossip. Your brain is hardwired to keep track of who is friends with whom. Thanks to this, your ancestors could maintain stable relationships with around 150 people. This limit is known as Dunbar's number. Neanderthals, on the other hand, lived in very small, isolated family groups. They rarely interacted with other tribes outside of their immediate valley. When a brutal winter destroyed their hunting grounds, a Neanderthal family had no one else to ask for help. They fought and died alone. But when your ancestors faced starvation, their massive social networks saved them. They could trade tools, share food, and rely on distant tribes. You didn't conquer the world because you were individually smarter or stronger. You won because you had the ability to form massive, unified alliances. It was the power of community that allowed Homo sapiens to spread across the globe. But eventually, this expansion led to a deadly collision. As your ancestors boldly marched out of Africa and entered the frozen European landscapes, they finally walked right into heavily guarded Neanderthal territory. When your ancestors arrived in Eurasia, they didn't find an empty land. They found a harsh, frozen world already ruled by these apex survivors. Resources were incredibly scarce. Two highly intelligent human species were now forced to compete for the exact same herds of woolly mammoths and deer. But your ancestors had a deadly advantage. While Neanderthals relied on dangerous close-quarters combat, your species brought projectile weapons and massive trading networks. The Neanderthal populations were already incredibly small and genetically isolated. Over thousands of years, they were slowly pushed out of their prime hunting grounds. They were forced to retreat to the very edges of the continent, seeking refuge in isolated coastal places like Gorham's Cave in modern-day Gibraltar. Around 40,000 years ago, can verify, the very last physical Neanderthal took their final breath, disappearing from the ancient fossil record completely forever. For decades, scientists believed this was a simple, brutal story of extinction. The smarter humans wiped out the primitive cavemen. But history is complicated. The encounters between your ancestors and Neanderthals were not always violent. Sometimes, around those ancient campfires, they shared more than just food and space. They actually interbred. When these two different human species met in the cold valleys of Europe and Asia, they created hybrid children together. We know this thanks to Nobel-winning scientist Svante Pääbo and researchers at the Max Planck Institute, who accomplished something previously thought absolutely impossible. They successfully extracted and sequenced ancient DNA from tiny fragments of Neanderthal bone, allowing us to read their genetic code for the first time. When they compared that ancient genetic blueprint to modern humans like you, they found a completely shocking, world-changing evolutionary secret hiding inside us. The Neanderthals never truly went extinct. Instead, they were slowly absorbed and assimilated into the much larger, rapidly expanding global population of Homo sapiens. If you have European or Asian ancestry today, roughly 1 to 2% of your DNA, can verify, comes directly from these Neanderthal ancestors. They are literally living inside your cells right now. But what exactly is this ancient ghost DNA doing to your modern body today? To understand its impact, we have to look at the immune system. When your ancestors left Africa, they faced entirely new, deadly Eurasian pathogens. Neanderthals had already spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting to these local viruses. By interbreeding, your ancestors essentially downloaded a rapid immune upgrade. This borrowed genetic code acted like a prehistoric antivirus software, protecting your ancient grandparents from dying in a completely foreign and hostile environment. However, there is a catch. This ancient immune system was built to fight off brutal prehistoric infections that simply do not exist today. So, what happens when you put an aggressively hyperactive Ice Age immune system into a clean, safe, and highly sanitized modern city environment? It gets bored and attacks harmless things. Scientists link Neanderthal DNA directly to modern allergies. If you sneeze at pollen, blame your prehistoric cousins. But the gifts from the Neanderthals don't just stop at your immune system. This ghost DNA also physically shaped how you look today. Their genes heavily influence your keratin production, which dictates the thickness of your hair and the toughness of your skin against the cold. If you have thick, straight hair or skin that easily adapts to low sunlight environments, you are literally wearing your Neanderthal heritage right now. They also passed down a trait for rapid blood clotting. In a brutal ice age filled with predators, bleeding out was a constant threat. If a prehistoric hunter got deeply scratched by a beast, this incredibly fast blood clotting mechanism would instantly seal the wound, saving their life. But today, you aren't fighting cave bears. You are sitting at a desk. That same fast-clotting survival trait now increases your stroke risk. Anthropologists call this phenomenon an evolutionary mismatch. Your physical body is perfectly optimized for a harsh, freezing wilderness that disappeared long ago. You are essentially driving a heavy-duty armored tank on a smooth, modern highway. The adaptations that kept you alive are now causing traffic jams. This ghost DNA proves that human evolution wasn't just a straight line of us wiping them out. It was a complex, messy, biological collaboration. Let's return to our original question. What if that very last Neanderthal family in Gorham's Cave didn't actually fade into dust? Imagine a bizarre glitch in time. They step right out of their prehistoric cave and walk straight into a bustling, loud, modern city. If you gave an average male Neanderthal a fresh, modern haircut, a close shave, and dressed him in a tailored business suit, what would actually happen? Would people run away screaming in terror? Not at all. If he sat directly across from you on your crowded morning subway commute, you probably wouldn't even look twice at him. You would simply assume he was a professional rugby player or a heavily built construction worker. Mentally, they wouldn't be mindless zombies. Because their physical brains were larger than yours, they could absolutely learn to navigate our complex modern world. Could they use a smartphone? Yes. Neanderthals were master toolmakers who invented synthetic glue. Swiping a glass screen would be incredibly easy for them. What about speaking to you? Thanks to their hyoid bone and the FOXP2 language gene, researchers believe they could learn to speak modern languages perfectly. However, their physical vocal cords suggest they would have surprisingly high-pitched, loud voices, completely ruining that deep, grunting caveman stereotype you always imagine. But while they could easily dress like you and talk like you, the bustling, modern social environment would probably utterly destroy their mental health. Remember their isolated Ice Age lifestyle? Being surrounded by thousands of unknown strangers in a modern city would likely trigger massive, constant panic attacks. Their brains simply weren't wired for massive social networks. A Neanderthal would be the ultimate introvert, deeply overwhelmed by crowded rooms and social media. And physically, our modern world would act as a slow poison. Remember the massive 5,000 calories they needed every day to survive the cold? If a Neanderthal ate heavily processed modern junk food instead of wild mammoth meat, their hyper-efficient survival metabolism would cause rapid and deadly obesity. The ultimate evolutionary irony is that the brilliant, comfortable civilization you built would be a highly toxic, unbearable environment for your strongest prehistoric cousins. Ultimately, a pure Neanderthal would struggle to survive as a separate species in our modern world, simply because this society was built exclusively by us. But the grand story of evolution is never just about who is physically the strongest or who can hunt the biggest Ice Age animals. Evolution is about survival and adaptability. While they adapted perfectly to the freezing prehistoric tundra, your ancestors adapted through massive interconnected social networking. And when you look at the big picture, the Neanderthals didn't actually fail the ultimate evolutionary test. They just found a different way forward. Instead of fighting a losing battle against a changing climate and a booming Homo sapiens population, they merged their genetic destiny with ours. The microscopic genetic code they left behind was the ultimate parting gift. It helped your ancient grandparents survive the brutal Eurasian winters unharmed. It provided the crucial immune system upgrades needed to fight off completely foreign, deadly diseases that would have easily wiped out your ancestors. It gave you the tough skin and thick hair required to withstand freezing temperatures, allowing humanity to spread to the coldest corners everywhere. Even if some of those ancient traits cause you annoying allergies or specific health risks today, they are the reason you are alive. Every single time you violently sneeze at spring pollen or feel your blood clot over a paper cut, you are experiencing their lingering ghost. They are not just dusty, fossilized bones sitting in a quiet museum display. And they are definitely not the mindless cavemen from cartoon stereotypes. They were highly intelligent, compassionate survivors who cared for their sick, buried their dead, and created beautiful art deep inside warm, glowing caves. Their existence is a profound testament to the incredibly messy, beautiful, and deeply collaborative biological nature of our shared human evolutionary history tree. So the next time you try to imagine what it would be like to stand face to face with an actual living Neanderthal today, you don't need to walk down a crowded modern street and pass a stranger. You just need to stand up and look in the mirror.